Well, hello, good morning or good evening, depending on where in the world you are, and welcome to this super special event on how the Baltic States are supporting Ukraine. I'm Edward Lucas, I'm Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Centre for European Policy Analysis, and I've been dealing with the Baltic States since the Soviet occupation era in 1990, and I've seen them regain their independence, restore their economies, their political systems, join the EU and NATO. And now we see them at the forefront of international attempts to support beleaguered Ukraine. I don't think I need to remind this audience of the horrific fate that has befallen Ukraine, the unprovoked attack from the Russian Federation, which is unfolding in front of our eyes as we discuss this. People are being bombed and shelled in Kharkiv and Kiev and other places. And we all feel helpless and we wonder what we can do. And the answer is, well, the Baltic States, along with their Polish neighbors and other countries, are doing things. And we want to talk about what we are doing, what we can do, both on the humanitarian side and on the geopolitical side. So I'm delighted to be joined by the three ambassadors of the Baltic States in Washington, DC. From Estonia, we have Kristjan Prikk, from Latvia, Māris, Selga, and from Lithuania, Audra, Plepytė. I'm not going to go into the full biographies of these three, but you can guess that being the ambassador to DC is the pinnacle of a diplomatic career in the Baltic States. They all have long, distinguished record behind them. I want to get straight into this discussion, really, because I think there's no time for pleasantries, and I want to focus on really three things. One, what are the each of these countries, what are they doing? What's the particular point they want to get across? I want to talk a little bit about regional security, because Sweden and Finland have gone from being close friends of NATO, but not in NATO, to taking steps really towards joining NATO, and that will have a transformative effect, some would say, on the security of the Baltic Sea region, and we can explore that a bit, because this is an absolute one of the many game changers. And I'd be interested to talk about Germany as well. If we'd had this discussion only a week ago, we would have been lamenting the German passivity, some would say even irresponsibility, when it comes to regional security, persistent underspender on defense, hobbled by all sorts of neurotic restrictions on not sending weapons to conflict zones, or at least not sending them to this conflict zone, sending helmets when Ukraine needed anti-tank weapons. Well, better late than never. That has changed, an extraordinary flip-flop in German policy, and that's certainly something that we'll want to talk about as well. But enough of me. We're going to go into the discussion, and I'm going to ask Ambassador Prikk to kick us off. We'll go from north to south at the start, and I'll finish up going from south to north. Ambassador Prikk, give us a few minutes of how it seems from Estonia. I know that the demonstration in Tallinn a few days ago was the biggest in Estonia since the era of the struggle to regain independence, something's interrupted me there. So over to you, Ambassador Prikk.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about this unfortunately very timely issue today, and thanks for the question. Now, as you mentioned earlier, this crisis is certainly not the Ukraine crisis, or not just the Russia-Ukraine crisis, but this is we should call the crisis by its right name. It's Russian invasion of a sovereign independent Ukraine. Now, what's important from our point of view is that this crisis is not just about Russian obsession about Ukraine, but this is one step in a series of attacks against the European security architecture, and the step that does have already and will have further global repercussions, or the tremblings of this crisis will certainly have global scope. Now, what we have considered from the very beginning of this crisis very important is the unity between the allies, but also in the allied countries itself across the political spectrum. And as you mentioned, in Estonia there is a very strong sense of unity with Ukraine, but also very strong understanding that this crisis is about Europe as a whole, and also has this global impact. The other part, we are talking about strong support to Ukraine, not just political, but also economic and military assistance. We've been doing quite a lot on that, but if you allow me later, I can describe the content of it or the details of it a bit longer. And thirdly, we have held the view, and this view has only strengthened that we have to seriously and very rapidly raise the costs of the aggression. To make sure that there is no way the aggressor can get away with it, and the aggressor can come out of this war and this aggression stronger than they were before. And fourthly, I'd like to emphasize the need to adjust the NATO force posture, particularly to strengthen the deterrence and defense posture in the eastern flank. So this is how we see it right now, but I'd be happy to discuss it further later. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much indeed for that, Ambassador. And I can't help just mentioning that the common belief in the West that this is a new crisis and something has gone wrong recently. Let's never forget your former president, the late Lennart Meri, gave a speech in Hamburg in 1994, warning both about the dangers of what was then called the Karaganov Doctrine, that Russia had the right and duty to intervene on behalf of what they called the compatriots abroad. And in that speech, he also attacked the West for its dreadful mixture of naivete and realpolitik. So let nobody say we weren't warned. Māris, Selga, Ambassador, let's hear a voice from.
And sorry, we also remember who walked out during the speech.
Indeed,
there was this Russian representative from St. Petersburg city government.
Yes, a humble, corrupt official called Vladimir Putin. Ambassador Selga, let's hear a voice from Latvia. You, like Estonia, actually have a border with Russia and with Belarus, which has just changed its geopolitical orientation several notches further in the direction of the Kremlin, which must be a worry for you. But tell us what you're doing and how you see the situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sipa, and of course, thank you very much, Mr. Lucas, for the possibility, to participate in this event. I think we last time we were on Zoom, all three ambassadors, we were speaking. Was it in 2020 on COVID issues? And probably I would prefer that topic much better than this one we are speaking today. But situation is as it is. I can fully subscribe to what my Estonian colleague said, and I think I probably will not say anything new, but just a short issues. Short sentences from my side is, unity, unity, and unity. That's what is helping us, and also shows Mr. Putin. What he has to deal with. So that I think that this Russia's invasion into Ukraine has showed that West is not lost, and even if we can say, as you mentioned, President Meri's speech, if we can say that from our point of view that we have told you so, that probably our neighbor in East is not the most reliable one, so that it's anyway, I think this unity what we have achieved, as a transatlantic community, I think it's probably one of the best results of this those tragic events. Of course, Latvia works together with transatlantic allies, to stop Putin in Ukraine. We can, of course, discuss later on how we do this on different levels. And there probably from Latvian side, as you know, that we have NATO Stratcom on disinformation stationed in Latvia. So I think that one of the points would be interesting to mention also the the need for resist of disinformation coming from Kremlin. So that's, I think, we can also discuss later on. But in general, I mean, agreeing what Kristjan said on the NATO issues and then the first posture in the future, I think that the most important part is unity, which actually also works, I mean, towards very positively towards Ukraine, so that they do see that West is that they are not left alone. They are, yes, left alone probably military, because NATO cannot enter their territory and help them, physically, but I think that morally and also financially, and if we speak about sanctions, I think we are behind them, we are helping them, and I think that the response what Western society or transatlantic society has shown, I think it's fantastic. So that it's as you mentioned, Mr. Lucas, I mean, you couldn't probably imagine a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, I mean, such a response to Russia's invasion into Ukraine. I will stop here, of course, I mean, so we can go into the details later on as well.
Thank you so much. And someone was tweeting that if you'd wanted anyone to unite Europe, revive NATO, finally get Britain to deal with dirty money, get Germany to change its security posture, who could you have asked? And there was Putin saying, yes, let me do it for you. But of course, we can never forget what a terrible human cost is coming for this very belated geopolitical awakening. Ambassador Plepytė, I've been so touched by the solidarity that the Lithuanians have been showing on Belarus, the spirit of 1863, alive and well, and that was already impressive. And now when I see the money you're collecting and all the other things you're doing for Ukraine, it's just it's overwhelming. So give us your take.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for gathering us for this discussion. I think it's very timely and very important as well. So, thank you for nice words. And for the start, let me not to agree with you, Edward Lucas, on that was the Putin who is behind our unity and change. I think last week really was a tectonic change in the whole world, in Europe and in the whole world, when Russia invaded and started war against Ukraine. But the fearful fight of Ukrainians, the President Zelensky leadership as well. So I think that as well gave us example how all of us have to fight for our freedoms and values. And they are fighting since Putin announced the war against Ukraine, but also against rules-based order and democracy, Western or something. So I think they're really fighting the war for Ukraine, but also for all us. And that's why this spirit of fight and standing up for their values and freedoms also gives us very much courage as well to stand up for Ukrainians and together also for that. So I'm also very happy to know this tectonic change which I started among our allies, when, as you mentioned, Germany changed their policy and increased the defense budget, submitted guns, military aid to Ukraine. The same Sweden and Finland, which were always neutral ones submitting. So this overwhelming support for Ukraine in military or humanitarian assistance is very important, as well as sanctions against Russia as aggressor as well, where all we have unity, not only among the EU or US, but also wildly some Asian countries, Australia, Canada joining. So it is, and if we had this conversation a week ago, we would haven't imagined that we would be so quick and so tough in responding to aggressor. And I think that we have to note and we have to follow that. And yeah, thank you for good words. So Lithuanians are very much behind that and very much supporting. I think we still remember the 30 years ago when Russian tanks were attacking our TV tower and parliament as well, and people stood up for that without guns and everything. Fortunately for us, then there was no there was some casualties or something, but at least there was not full army attack against Lithuania, what we see now in Ukraine. And also, fortunately for Ukrainians, they're much better equipped now to stand up. And so we have to support them as well in their fight. And yeah, so as you mentioned, Lithuanians are very much starved. They collected millions of euros in a couple of days to support. Being less than 3 million, we collected more than 4 million euros a couple of days. Humanitarian aid as well is going, and they had to stop because people were giving too much already of clothes, sleeping bags or something. So after one day, they had to stop this action because it was in demonstrations everywhere, something. So that is so we can speak as well. But what I also wanted to say as well, and thank to all our allies as well, because strengthening the NATO eastern flank is also very important. If you spoke before about the deterrence, so we have time to speak about also defense, not attack. So that's for me, though. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador. The humanitarian need is just so great. It's easy to focus just on that. And I'm urging people not to think that they need to get here in London and drive supplies over Europe to London. You can buy them, send the money instead. I think we should try and break the problem down into bits. And I think one thing is what can we do within the EU and NATO right now for Ukraine? This is a moment finally where the voices from Europe's east are being listened to after so many years where you were ignored or worse, even patronized and told that you didn't really understand Russia, or as I think the Finns said to Thomas Hendrik Ilves, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. That era is over. I think we are now being listened to. So what's our to-do list? There's on the military side, what do we think about no-fly zones? What should we be pushing NATO to do? Or maybe I've heard also the idea of a we-fly zone where we have a kind of airlift into Ukraine of maybe civilian planes or maybe civilian and military ones at the invitation of the Ukrainian government. And then we say to the Russians, you don't shoot us down, we're here legally. Should we be doing more on the is there some extra level of sanctions that we should be doing? And in the EU, we've seen this extraordinary resolution of the European Parliament fast tracking Ukraine for EU membership. What else? What more do we want from the EU? So I'd like each of you just going again in the same order: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Just give me one or two bullet points. Maybe one for Ukraine, for EU, one for NATO. Things that your country is pushing for right now, which other countries should support. Ambassador Prikk.
Yeah, there are sort of many things that that still can be done, but the Ukrainians have pleaded for more weaponry and ammunition so that they can defend themselves, and this is certainly something that we have to continue to deal with. My country, as well as Latvia and Lithuania, most other European countries have committed to sending significant packages of weaponry and other defense-related items to Ukraine. But as we speak, these stocks are being used, and we need to help them replenish them. So we have to think of that, but also about the logistics, how to get it there. And at this point, at least the land bridge seems to be the most reliable. On the EU side, we are certainly urging, firstly, the EU to move ahead with giving the European perspective to Ukraine, to strengthen the message and accept Ukraine as a candidate country. But on the Russian sanctions, there are things that we can still work with. See how to avoid any loopholes for the Russian banks in these current sanctions, so that the state cannot move their assets from one bank to another or create another shell structure to avoid the sanctions. But also think creatively how to make sure that the Russian ships cannot enter the ports of European countries and cannot yeah. So
Yes,
these are my couple of points. Thank you.
yes. I hope the land bridge is still the best way in. I'm worried about aid piling up in Poland when it's needed in Ukraine's a big place, and I just wonder how we get it across. You know, we need to supply Dnipro, and that's a very long way. I've done that journey. It's a long way even in peacetime. But anyway, Ambassador Selga, give us your couple of your to-do list for our decision makers in Brussels.
Thank you very much for the question. I think I can, as I said, I mean, Kristjan already almost told everything what we are doing internationally, so that if you look on those, let's say, if we can, let's say, put it, let's say, in 3 tiers, I mean, that's support where we can provide, I mean, and help Ukraine is, of course, the first is international. That's international organizations. We are all working together. It's EU, it's NATO, it's United Nations, it's Council of Baltic States. I mean, wherever we can manage to punish our eastern neighbor. I mean, so and make life for him a little bit more difficult. That, of course, is a bilateral level where my both colleagues mentioned what they are doing, and the same we are. Exactly doing the same also on Latvian side, providing ammunition, providing stingers, providing humanitarian help. I think our Lithuanian colleague Audra mentioned that in a couple of days, Lithuania collected over 4 million euros. I mean, in Latvia, the number was a little bit smaller, the country is smaller. So we managed to do in 3 days, 3.2 million euros. So that's a huge amount. I mean, and that's brings me, to this the third level, which is people to people, assistance in this case, so that municipalities are ready to help refugees. So the state is ready, of course, and also municipalities are welcoming our Ukrainian friends if there is such a need. I think the government has announced that Latvia is ready to receive up to 10,000 refugees if it's necessary. We hope, of course, that will not happen, but because situation probably will get better, so that with international pressure towards Russia, but we are ready also to help in that part. On the EU, I think that the decision which was made in the last couple of days, I think that's very remarkable also for European Union. And coming back, of course, to this unity issue, and you know very well, Mr. Lucas, it's not an easy, it hasn't been an easy, I mean, it doesn't mean that you just come together and then agree, because different countries has a different, not only interest, but also legislation systems. So that means you have to change a little bit. But I think that's what we have done within, let's say, if we put together last week, which has been done together with United States, within European Union, with the European countries, which of course includes UK in this case. And what Audra mentioned, Japan, Australia, I think that's a remarkable, result. So that almost, and we look at Switzerland, which always has a different attitude. Even they have, agreed, to implement sanctions, which has been put together by the European Union. So that I think it's very good result, and it shows that during the crisis we can work together very, very, very well. So I think that probably I will stop. NATO, of course, I know that. We all know how the European Union and NATO is providing, all necessary means for Ukrainians, to withstand Russian aggression. So that's I will stop probably here. So we can give floor to.
Thank you for that. And Audra, Ambassador Plepytė, let's go to you. I would be very interested to know your thoughts, particularly on Belarus, which is a country that Lithuania knows perhaps better than anyone else in the outside world, and whether there's anything we should be doing on that front as we see it sliding into the abyss of Kremlin geopolitics.
Yeah, right. During this last month, probably as well, we saw the also game change in Belarus as well. So they're still keeping nominal, independence, but how fast Russia deployed the troops and in which numbers in Belarus. So we can see that it's really Belarus became polygon or something for Russian troops as well. And now they are more or less already listening to Lukashenko, would say, participating in this war, not only allowing the territory to use, but they're speaking about the participating with the troops. So we will see how is that. So our position is also very clear when we speak about sanctions and how to prevent this aggression and to stop it. So we have to put as severe sanctions as possible to Russia, but also to Belarus as well, because they're acting as one, as we see now, and that's all the attacks to Kiev or something is taking, or missiles launched, they're taking from Belarus as well. So that's speaking on Belarus without going more to the details, but how they treat the society. And now the last referendum on the new constitution, which took part this weekend, and the decision was also to give up the non-nuclear status. So it's as well implications for the whole NATO and for the whole region as well on that. Mm-hmm. And answering your previous questions on how we can help Ukraine and what we can do. So of course, I think the first and the most important thing is to help them with the weapons, what the Ukrainians are asking. So we have to listen to the Ukrainians as well, or anti-missiles, that, and also very swiftly, as you mentioned, we have to do that very fast. Russians are not waiting, the army not waiting, so we have to do and to ensure the logistics as well. On sanction, mentioned what probably was not mentioned, and we also would have to do the war is going in Ukraine, but also the war is going on the social media and information area. We listen to the Russian TVs we get from Moscow, something is complete propaganda, what's happening. They're still talking about the attacks from Ukraine on Donbass or Luhansk and that, so we have to counter to do. And we heard today that they're closing Dost and some other TV stations who were still providing objective information to the Russian population. So we have to see how to that, and also to counter all the Russian disinformation and propaganda on our social media. And so our prime ministers and Polish prime minister also appealed to like Google, Twitter, Facebook, Meta, saying to take actions on stopping that propaganda. And we see very positive steps by that. So it's very important as well that not only we take the decisions on the governmental level, international level, but all the international companies, the private sector joins that. And we've seen many good examples of that. That's why it's really unprecedented, and we have to continue that way.
Well, thank you for that. And I think we might just have a quick bit of discussion on the information space, because this has been an extraordinary success by the Ukrainians. I mean, you couldn't imagine better social media use of video, and they're really getting their message across. And we used to think the Kremlin lie machine was really formidable, and it's really failing at the moment, in at least outside Russia. Of course, inside Russia is another story. And I know that you have, for example, Meduza based in Riga, that you've done in Lithuania has a long tradition of supporting the Russian opposition, both with your former Foreign Minister Linkevičius, who took particular interest in this, and with the Sakharov Center in Kaunas. And Estonia has been absolutely in the forefront of combating Russian language propaganda and putting out an alternative in Estonia with your ETV Plus channel for Russian speakers. So I wonder if each of you, is there something that we're not doing that we could do to try and puncture the Kremlin's information bubble, to get the message across to the Russians that it's thousands of their young men have died in this senseless war, and every one of them has left a sister or mother or brother or girlfriend or a child or whatever. This is a tremendous, and the desertions and the possible mutinies that we've heard about and the defections. There's a lot of really bad stuff going on, which the Russian public would be horrified if it knew, and we should be spreading that. Is there anything we could be doing more if we had more money or more resources to get that message across? Ambassador Prikk, you go first.
Thank you again. I think in a way we have to go back to some good examples and experiences from the Cold War time, where I grew up with Voice of America broadcast being jammed but still getting through. And my parents and our friends and relatives listening to those broadcasts and actually getting glimmers of hope from there. We of course had a unique situation where we could also watch the Finnish television and get the sort of Western news from there. But we have to just probably update some of these practices to the social media time and the differences in technologies. But we I'd say we have to have the gloves off approach and really understand that this is a conflict where we are being attacked also from the information domain, and we have to be creative in how to break through to the ordinary Russians. I don't know, maybe buy up some ad spaces where people look at their daily news and click on something that turns out to be truth from Ukraine, for example, or things like that.
Yeah. And Ambassador Selga, what's your feeling about the information space? Are you able to defend the information security inside Latvia? Because we've had plenty of examples of Russia trying to spread disinformation propaganda in both Russian and Latvian languages. And is there anything more we could be doing to counterattack?
Thank you for the question. Audra already mentioned, I mean, one of the steps what our Prime Minister, together with a Polish colleague, Polish Prime Minister, did regarding the big tech, regarding, stopping disinformation in Meta, in Facebook, on Instagram, and other those big networks. Yeah, unfortunately, as we know, I mean, Russia, of course, is also doing their part and closing a little bit those channels or those systems. I mean, the Twitter and Facebook within the Russian territory, so that there is no spread of information. So you know very well, I mean, in Latvia and elsewhere in Europe, so we have closed all the possible channels of Russian TVs. I mean, so different ones, so that. But of course, we do have to understand, if you have internet access, of course, if you need, I mean, if you want, you can of course always tune in and listen to Russian information as well. I agree what Kristjan said regarding the Voice of America or Free Europe, so that I think those are probably the old tools, and probably it's something which we can reinvent. I mean, and see if maybe that's working also in this case regarding disinformation. But the most easiest part is actually, but we have to look not only the governments and other institutions, but citizens itself, so that not to spread disinformation. So before we share something on Twitter or on Facebook, probably we have to read it and look, does it actually goes, I mean, to the direction, I mean, which we would like to see this information going, or probably it's complete disinformation. So that we have to be able to select, I mean, information which we are spreading around, because we know very well that one click on a Twitter or Facebook could create, of course, different let's say, situations which we would probably were not anticipating from the very beginning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and it's a very important reminder. Think first and then click. Don't click first and then think. Audra, Ambassador, did you want to come back with any further thoughts on this? And after that, I want to get on to the question of the change in Sweden and Finland and how the Baltic Sea regional security is changing.
On information, I think I said already most, but I think I think I have to work like two directions. First, how to spread the real information to the Russian people, and it's very complicated and very difficult. I think we are already like in the Cold War environment, when all the international or networks or something are blocked and not allowed and working. So we have to probably rely on our experience, as Estonian colleague mentioned, on Radio Free Europe or broadcasting TV sections. I know we have to spread more information in Russian language as well. And we've seen even our president spoke in Russian now, some messages as well. And we saw State Department and others are doing that, or some even TV channels are doing, but how that would reach, the most important as well, that technical issues, how that would reach the ordinary people in Russia as well, and they make them listen because they are used to the national televisions as well. So but we have to continue to do that and to see, because we cannot even rely on the NGOs because they're also forbidden in Russia. So it's really it's very complicated, and also in the West or in our countries to work with it to stop the spread of this information, which is we can, I think, a bit more tools, but it's education probably of people as well. Potential. So
I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I do feel that so long as Telegram is still active and I spend a lot of time watching Russian television, and it's obviously hateful and does horrible stuff. And I spend a lot of time on Telegram. My feeling is we could do more on Telegram in Russian to get the message across. I would like to see Telegram channels devoted to anti-Putin jokes, for example, and anti-Putin memes, as well as really pushing the names and the ages of the soldiers who've been killed and captured. And I think that Telegram, and I also want to just say that President Nauseda's speech in Russian was magnificent, and it reminded me of a speech that President Landsbergis gave in 1991, I think, after the attack on the TV tower, or maybe after Medinink, I don't remember which, but it was exceptional. And I think it shows that the importance of all our leaders in the Baltic states, the ability to speak in Russian to not just local Russians, but also to Russians across the border is really important. And of course, Belarusian, if you can do it. So let's move on now to the Baltic Sea regional environment. We've got about 20 minutes left. And I spent most of the last year working on a report called Close to the Wind, which was a very thorough study of the difficulty of making the most of Baltic Sea security, looking at difficulties of planning and reinforcement, the lack of the ISR and AMD capabilities, the difficulties of having the most important countries not in NATO, although very close to it, the wildly complicated command structure with different headquarters in different places, and huge dependence on the Americans and lack of realistic exercises, particularly the really hard exercises that test things going wrong. I could bore on for hours about the shortcomings, and we made recommendations as well, which will be coming out soon. But that's really changed in two big respects. First, we now have serious input from Germany, and for a lot of the people we spoke to felt that in the end you couldn't really rely 100% on Germany, because they might, for political reasons or for others, just not be fully on board in a crisis. And then also the question of Sweden and Finland. So let's go round again in our trio. What is our feeling now about Sweden, Finland, and NATO? Do we actually want them to join? Would it be risky for them to join right now, or should we get it over with quickly? What's the advice we are giving to our Finnish and Swedish colleagues, and how to manage this extraordinary moment we have where their public has really, I wouldn't say the Finnish public's woken up, because they really were always awake, but I think the Swedes have certainly woken up big time. Should we ask them to concentrate on Gotland and that aspect? Do we want them just to spend more on defence? Do we want them to have boots on the ground in the Baltic states? What do we want from Sweden and Finland? Ambassador Prikk first.
Yeah, that's the good one. As far as questions go, really good one. But of course, it's up to those countries to decide. And we know that today there, I think, still as we speak, there is a political debate involving all the Finnish parliamentary parties in Finland over the security choices and challenges of the country, including the NATO option, as they call it. But what we have said for long time is that Sweden and Finland joining NATO would be the single most positive step affecting positively the Baltic Sea security. Both countries are strong in defense, both in terms of their mindset as well as actual capability to contribute. Finland never really cut their military, or they never really thought that history was over. So these countries would be a very strong contribution to the Baltic Sea security, and these countries being part of NATO, certainly. What we have witnessed is that the Baltic Sea region has been, for the past 30 years, the growth region in the world. The growth figures have surpassed any other major region in the world. And this all is thanks to the political and security stability that the accession of our countries to EU and NATO has achieved. And it's our intent to keep it that way, that the Baltic Sea region is where good business can be done, where things are predictable, stable, and prosperous. So again, we are looking with very great interest what's going on in these two countries.
Good. Well, I think there's a very important for us to get our messaging straight on this, because I have Swedish friends who are it's almost like they're waking up from a deep sleep of 30 years and asking slightly kind of naive questions about how dangerous this is and what should they do and what would it mean to be in NATO. And so I think our colleagues over in Stockholm particularly should be getting onto Swedish talk shows and writing op-eds and making the most of this this opening. Ambassador Selga.
Thank you for this topic in general. I think could we imagine? I mean, a couple of years ago, I mean that there was such a strong desire, such as active discussions in Finland and Sweden regarding joining NATO. So I mean, so it's not a secret, of course, that it's important, as Kristjan said, important for the Baltic Sea security, Baltic Sea region security in general. But I think that also shows that Russia, with actions, with aggression in Ukraine, actually has achieved completely opposite that they wished for. That they were worrying about NATO countries around their borders, and they could probably get some more. I mean, so that I think that from our perspective, of course, it's a very positive step. I mean, so, and the same as in case in Ukraine, we are saying that that's up to the countries to decide what kind of security arrangements or organizations they are choosing, I mean, to join. So that's a good example, actually, how it should happen in the democratic society. And if those countries will choose to join NATO, to join NATO, I think we will be wishing, of course, to accept them, but as democratic as possible. So showing that it's actually the wish and the will of the country to do so. So I think that I think that another blow, I mean, to our eastern neighbor. I mean, so that shows that something has gone wrong this time, and I hope that the discussions in Sweden and Finland will go to direction which we all probably are wishing for.
Good, thank you, Ambassador Plepytė. I would be very happy to hear your thoughts on this, and also if you have any thoughts on Kaliningrad, which is it seems now there's a particular worry that maybe the next stage in Putin's plan after Ukraine was to demand a land bridge across the Suwałki-Alytus corridor to Kaliningrad. And are you seeing anything in Kaliningrad? Is there anything that either Lithuania and Poland or NATO or anyone else should be doing in order to contain any potential threat? And if we ban Russian planes from crossing Lithuanian airspace, does that affect the supply of Kaliningrad? Is that a potential difficulty?
Thank you. So maybe I'll start with the Swedish and Finnish, just maybe just a couple of sentences, because it's a lot of us said, so we cannot decide for them. So they will have to choose their own path. But I think what is the most important thing that they realized, as you mentioned, they'll wake up on their security and defense. So they will be much more serious on that. We already saw the troops, Swedish troops in Gotland, and so that's, I think, it's also a good sign that they're more serious, and we will see how I think they would make the real right conclusions out of the situation. So, and we will see how it develops, and of course we will more than happy to cooperate in any way whatever path they choose. But I'm pretty sure that we will be benefiting, all of us, for the whole Baltic Sea region on that, on the security and defense sense. And Kaliningrad, yes, we spoke already for a while. I mean, it's the most militarized piece of land in Europe. That's so where they're having big troops and tanks and Iskander missiles. So it's I don't need to speak about that. And for us, it's a big concern. How is that, and how is now having Russian troops in Belarus? Even this Suwalki corridor, Suwalki gap, is becoming even more vulnerable, or deserves much more attention from us. So that's why I stress when I started to speak, saying how important is the strengthening of the NATO eastern flank, and especially Baltic states as well. We have to deter Russians and defend Baltic states as well as in Latvia and Estonia. So we need also more presence and more robust presence of NATO and all our allies in that, and what we were witnessing as well recent weeks, months as well, and we have to work for that as well.
Good. Well, we're coming close to the end. This conversation's gone very quickly. And I think that perhaps the most useful thing now would be to try and look into our crystal balls and think, what's coming up the path that we need to prepare for? Because I feel that the West's reaction to Russia, ever since really the collapse of the Soviet Union, has always been like someone who's driving, looking in the rearview mirror. We hear a bump, look in the mirror and try and work out what it was that just happened. We've been really bad at predicting things. And I have to say, I got it wrong. I thought that the build-up of military force on the Ukrainian northern border was a bluff to try and a sort of maskirovka to make us accept something else nasty, maybe in Belarus or maybe in occupied Donetsk and Luhansk. So I'm not claiming I'm getting it right either. But given the immense expertise that you have in seeing inside Russia, and I always say that the Baltic states understand Russian decision making in a way that almost no one else does. What do you think we should look for next? I was particularly worried to see Lavrov speaking after that wonderful boycott, but he said that Russia was demanding the withdrawal of all American nuclear weapons from Europe and all the associated infrastructure. That's clearly an intolerable demand, just like his demand for the demilitarization, as he would put it, of the Baltic states and the sort of neutralization of NATO. So we have a long and intimidating list of geopolitical demands from Russia. But if we were to have this meeting again in maybe, say, a month or 2 months, cast your eye into the future. What will we be dealing with? What will be what's coming towards us that we ought to worry about? Because I'm sure many of the non-Balts on this call would be fascinated to know what you think of the trajectory of the events. And we're going in reverse order this time. I'm going to come straight back to you, Ambassador Plepytė, and then go to Māris, Selga, and then finish up with Kristjan Prikk. So crystal ball time, what's coming?
The most difficult thing probably, because I don't have crystal ball, unfortunately, and it's very difficult to predict. And I think it's usually you cannot predict because you have to based on facts and what is that, and what we saw from how developed this situation as well, and how is that. So we have to see that I think Russians are very serious on their demands and what they said. And regarding Ukraine, regarding withdrawal of NATO troops from the areas in 1997, and again, they're changing the whole security structure in Europe. I think that's clear. I doubt they would be giving up very soon or something like that. So I think we have to prepare, we have to wish for the best, but prepare for the worst. So we have to continue then to helping Ukraine. That would be long and war, and to see how we can help in our best way and adapt quickly to the situation. They save on sanctions as well, keep pushing Russia on changing the sanctions. We had a huge, one of the best examples how the all allies, the whole world united during this week. President Biden showed the leadership since already for a number of months, saying that that's the danger and we have to be united. Now we have also Chancellor Scholz's speech saying the Germany is also stepping up very seriously on that. A number of countries did historic decisions by them changing their attitudes and their perception as well. So we have to move. That's the most important thing. We don't give up and to move towards that direction and to see and to adapt to the new situation very quickly, to introduce, if it's needed, the new sanctions or to submit more help for Ukraine. And I hope that in a couple of months we will speak not in a bit better environment for Ukraine and for all us. So, but I think that would be tough weeks and tough months ahead of us. So we have to be united and we don't hear you. Look.
Yes, again. So if Russia is trying to divide us and intimidate us and spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt, then obviously the thing we must do most of all is to be united and brave and decisive and confident. Thank you for that. Ambassador Selga, final words from you. What should we be looking for in the next couple of months or in any time frame you choose?
No, thank you. That's $1 million or $2 million question, of course. And as you said, and Audra said, we don't have a crystal ball. So that it's, and we do understand that so far we have seen that President Putin is not very predictable, so that anything else also can happen. I think what we have to take into consideration, in Europe and also United States, that of course there will be sanctions which will be provided by Russian Federation. Regarding as an answer to our sanctions, so that will hit us and America. So we probably have to live with that for a while, and it's not the first time. Of course, we had the same in 2014. That's what will bring, let's say, a little bit will probably create also problems for our economies, especially those who are the closest to Russia. But I think that one more thing what we have to take into consideration, of course, is that with aggression towards Ukraine, Russia, of course, has put itself, in completely different situation, so that their bargaining power also has changed. So that, of course, they would like to, to come back to 1997 regarding NATO and everything else. But, being named as aggressor, doesn't give much leverage, also in Russia's case. So that I think the only thing I can hope, of course, agreeing everything what Audra said, is that, the next time when we will meet, we will speak probably better about COVID and something else, but we will have a peace for our friends and colleagues in Ukraine.
Good, thank you. Well, final word from you, Ambassador Prikk.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas, again. I'm partly just echoing what my colleagues Audra and Māris just said. You mentioned the time frame of 1 month. I'm afraid that this crisis will most definitely not be over. I'm not confident that there is any de-escalation in this conflict. So And in this conflict, I'm referring to this wider conflict between Russia and collective West. So we have to be ready for a long-term confrontation and adjust our policies and actions accordingly. Secondly, what Ukraine certainly has already reminded us is that we have to make a stand against the bully. Giving up or sort of appeasing the bully makes things only worse. Thirdly, when it comes to defense of the eastern flank, we have to make serious adjustments. And what I'm referring to is we have to move from forward presence to forward defense, from deterrence by punishment to deterrence by denial. This is a principle change, but we have to do that in order to avoid ugly things happening. And finally, I would like to say that in this particular situation, we cannot kid ourselves. We cannot use ice rink for figure skating when they are prepared for, or they are coming to the ice rink for ice hockey. So we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you so much. I love that. Don't come for figure skating. We do figure skating, they do ice hockey. That epitomizes the way that many Europeans have dealt with Russia over the last few years. And thank you for adding that. So I think I want to thank all of you. And my concluding sort of feeling is that it's the most important test now is of patience and willpower. We have been very bad in the West over many years in keeping focused on things. We get keen on a problem, and then we get bored, and we get discouraged, we get scared, and we move on. And this is more, it's not really a battle of artillery against cities. It's really fundamentally a battle about willpower. And there are some fundamental problems on the Russian side because we believe in our cause in a way that I'm not sure the Russians believe in theirs. I think we get up every morning, those of us who remember life behind the Iron Curtain, and we're grateful that we live in freedom. And I don't think Russians get up every morning and wish for Ruski Mir and for the reunification of historic Rus and these other crazy things that Putin talks about. So that's the real question. Do we keep our willpower going on long enough before the fundamental contradictions on the Russian side break out? And I don't know whether it'll be military mutinies and the collapse in the Russian army, or whether it'll be public demonstrations or an economic collapse or a palace coup or some mixture of all of those. But something bad is heading down the road towards Putin, and we just have to keep going until that happens, and obviously do everything we can to accelerate it. So our time is up. On behalf of SIPA, I want to thank all three of you ambassadors. We know how busy you are. You are at the absolute intersection of the fate of Europe with the capital of the free world, and it was good of you to spend an hour of your time each. I look forward so much to the day when we can meet with atoms rather than electrons. There's no substitute for face-to-face meetings, and we wish you success in your endeavors, and please be assured that SIPA is here as the security specialist for European security, a subject that was so unfashionable when we started this in 2005. People laughed at the idea you even needed a think tank devoted to European security. Well, no one's laughing now. So, Paldies, Aiti, and Achu to you all. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.